First, as long as one did not have an overwhelming battle strength, it was always right to probe a few more times. Second, be it in battle or other aspects, one must follow one's own train of thought. If one were disrupted by others, one would definitely die a miserable death. He came back to his senses. Matthew suddenly found himself illuminated by 8 spotlight-like lights. The message bar was filled with notifications that said, "The soul of the rainforest invites you to enter the Black Banyan Dream." "You're really impatient." Matthew smiled and chose to agree before the 9th light of guidance descended. A light feeling came from under Matthew's feet, and then his entire body rose up, turning into bubbles in the glow. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the Black Banyan Dream Realm. There were huge banyan trees everywhere, and the humid air was mixed with a faint heat. Vines hung on the branches of the banyan trees, and some of the vines were full of small white flowers. Matthew followed the guide through the forest and arrived in front of a black banyan tree that towered into the clouds. There was an altar under the banyan tree. Right above the altar stood a throne made of vines and animal skulls. At this moment, a young girl with an impatient face was sitting on the throne. Her skin was fair and her face was young, but her eyes were filled with killing intent. The girl was wearing clothes woven from leaves. Her legs were well proportioned and slender. Her fair and tender feet and toes were raised on the throne, which was quite eye-catching. "Your movements are so slow, necromancer. Hurry up and choose your spoils of war. This is my gift to you." The young girl's tone was very cold. As soon as she finished speaking, the phantoms of 3 miniature Lord-tier monsters appeared on the altar. Dinosauruses. Patterned crocodile. Winged dragon wind god. Other than the winged dragon wind god, which was a corpse, the other 2 were alive and kicking. Matthew could even see them walking around and looking for food. Choose 1 out of 3. "I guess you probably won't consider other creatures, so I'm too lazy to bring them to you." "Hurry up and choose," the girl urged. "Don't be so wishy-washy. Be a man." Matthew's gaze wandered between the dinosauruses and the patterned gigantic crocodiles, and his eyes were filled with joy. He hesitated for a moment, then walked toward the dinosauruses. However, just as his fingers were about to touch the shadow, a strange feeling arose in his heart. Matthew reacted instantly and retracted his hand at lightning speed. He knew that it was the domain of temperance that sounded the alarm for him. "Yeah, what right do I have to choose dinosauruses? I don't even have the courage to face it." It was the same for the patterned crocodile. According to the promise of the soul of the rainforest, he could choose the shapeshifting form from any creature that participated in the siege. However, this was clearly not in line with the spirit of the rainforest. Matthew looked up and saw that the smug smirk on the girl's face was quickly fading away. "What are you doing? Hurry up and choose." The rainforest soul's impatience confirmed Matthew's guess. Thinking of this, he didn't hesitate anymore. He walked past the dinosauruses and the patterned crocodile and reached out to touch the winged dragon wind god. "I choose this." In the next second, Matthew's fingertips touched the phantom of the winged dragon wind god. A vast memory surged into his mind. He saw the blue sky, white clouds, cliffs, and strong winds. He saw the dense rainforest on the ground, the rivers that were like cellular belts, and the Tyrannosaurus rex that was wreaking havoc in the forest. Immediately after, his vision lowered, and a black shadow quickly swept across the rainforest. In an instant, he felt something heavy on his hooked claw. Matthew lowered his head to take a look. It was a baby Tyrannosaurus rex. Very quickly, the furious roar of an adult Tyrannosaurus rex came from the depths of the rainforest. However, the pterosaur that Matthew possessed had already spread its wings and disappeared into the sky. Hint: you have obtained the shapeshifting form of the winged dragon wind god. Winged dragon wind god, prehistoric descendant, true dragon bloodline, light/overlord of the sky, descendant of Gale. The winged dragon wind god has the ability to dominate the sky, but remember, you are not truly invincible. The winged dragon wind god had mastered the instinctive spells of air control and wind force. Due to the fact that the winged dragon wind god is a first-generation dinosaur species, it is not recognized by the true dragon. It will even be despised by the giant dragon species. Some giant dragons will actively hunt for dinosaur species, so please be vigilant in areas where giant dragons appear. Due to your class level, the creature level of the winged dragon wind god you transformed into has been adjusted to level 12. Matthew was very satisfied to have obtained a new shapeshifting form, and it was an extremely powerful winged dragon wind god. He did not care about the creature level adjustment. The highest level of the wilderness form could not exceed the level of the player's class by 4 at most, otherwise, the player would be restricted. However, as long as Matthew completed his advancement, this problem would naturally be solved. After making his choice, Matthew looked at the girl on the throne and saw that she was puffing her cheeks and looking angry. Matthew couldn't help but ask, what would have happened if I had chosen dinosauruses? The girl replied hatefully, of course, a dinosauruses will jump out and fight you to the death. You didn't kill a rainforest creature yourself, and you want to obtain its form. You're dreaming too much. Matthew frowned. So your previous promise was actually a lie? The girl said disapprovingly, cunning is also the nature of the rainforest. The final selection process is also a part of the trial. I've already treated you well enough and sent the winged dragon wind god to go easy on you. Trial. Matthew was surprised. Don't you ask for a trial? The girl asked, moreover, it's the highest level of domain trial. Although you offended me, I have to admit that you successfully passed the trial. I won't be stingy with your rewards. As she spoke, a green glow rose from the throne below her and landed on Matthew's body. Hint, you have passed the Rainforest Souls Wilderness Trial, Domain. Version. You have successfully stepped into the Nature subdomain, Rainforest, and have completed a short stay in it. As a reward for stepping into the domain, you can choose one of the following 3 abilities. Vigorous Energy, energy recovery speed increased by 100%. Master Biologist, you can instantly gain a large amount of knowledge about rainforest creatures. Arrow Frog's Gift, every 7 days, you will receive a small portion of the rainforest arrow frog's poison extract. So I was in a daze just now and saw so many rainforest creatures because I entered the domain. Matthew was enlightened. However, he soon became conflicted because he wanted all 3 options. Which man didn't love power? Rainforest knowledge was also very important. The poison of the arrow frog was to Matthew's liking. He hesitated for a moment and decided to make a bold move. Why are you so slow? The girl urged unhappily, pick one and get out. However, in the next second. However, she heard Matthew say in all seriousness, I can't make a choice. The girl said irritably, why? Matthew said. Because I never initiated the wilderness trial. I'm just a traveler who has just entered the rainforest. I was trying to communicate with you in the most basic way. The girl was stunned. What did you say? Matthew calmly explained his encounter. He swore that he did not request a trial from the soul of the rainforest. After the girl heard this, she frowned, and her eyes were blank. Wasn't it you? Then who was the one who sent me the trial request? Matthew smiled. That's not important. The important thing is that you seem to have neglected your duty. You threw a poor person who shouldn't have participated in the brutal wilderness trial to 3 Lord-tier monsters. Even if you are the soul of the rainforest, that won't cut it. The girl said unhappily, are you threatening me? Matthew shook his head and said, no, that wasn't a threat. It was just a statement of fact. After saying that, he took out blazing glue, fiery dragon oil, and Molotov cocktail from his inventory and waved them in front of the soul of the rainforest. Now, this is what you call a threat. More than 10 kilometers away. In a mysterious cave. 3 Django natives walked out side by side. One of them was an old rainforest shaman with a face full of oil paint. He looked into the depths of the rainforest in confusion and said to the tall man beside him, why didn't our ritual receive a response from the soul of the rainforest? Has it really abandoned us? This is already the 2nd time we've held a sacrificial ritual recently. There was clearly a fluctuation the first time, but there was no reaction this time. The wrinkles on the old shaman's face were almost squeezed together. This is the first time I've encountered such a situation in my life. A skinny young man next to him said worriedly, the people in the tribe have always been dissatisfied with the sacrifice of resources to Lumiere. After 2 consecutive failures, I'm afraid the 2nd elder and the others will not give in anymore. The old shaman nodded solemnly. I'll think of a way later. The old man turned around and looked at the cave that was filled with candles. Then, he let out a long sigh. You can stop, Izaros. This is my advancement ritual. There's no need to use the tribe's resources. The tall native named Lumiere said calmly, I don't want to trouble you for my matters anymore. The old shaman, Izaros, smiled kindly. Silly child, you are the future of the Black Banyan tribe. It is my duty to serve you. I believe in my own judgment. Among all the Djangos, only you have the chance to break through to the 5th tier and even become a legend. You will become the king of the rainforest, Lumiere. Lumiere walked over and grabbed the old man's withered hand. He said sincerely, I'm serious, Izaros. If you believe in your own vision, then you should believe that the future king of the rainforest can solve this problem on his own. Izaros was stunned for a moment. He looked at the young man before him with a complicated gaze. For a moment, he seemed to have seen the scene more than 20 years ago when he held Lumiere, who was still a baby in his swaddling clothes, and the latter cried loudly. "You've grown up, Lumiere." The old shaman was filled with emotion. His hand that was holding Lumiere trembled slightly. "I believe you, but you have to tell me, how do you plan to solve this problem yourself?" Lumiere said firmly, "The soul of the rainforest didn't respond to us. It might not have abandoned the Black Banyan tribe, but it could also be a test for me. In the next few days, I will hunt the twin-legged flying dragons or patterned crocodiles alone. Every hour, I will offer a sacrifice of this level to the honorable soul of the rainforest. I believe that my devotion is enough to move the soul of the rainforest." The old shaman was instantly moved. "This is very dangerous." Lumiere smiled confidently. "Yes, I am dangerous to the ferocious beasts in the rainforest. Don't forget, Izaros, I'm the only blood hunter of the Black Banyan tribe." He put down the old man's hands and called out to the thin young man, "Ajin, help me take care of Izaros. I'll be back soon. When I return, I'll be a tier 5 child of the rainforest. Wait for my good news." As he spoke, Lumiere leapt up the tree like a cheetah, then darted around the branches like an ape. Within a few breaths, his figure merged with the vast rainforest. Black Banyan Dream Realm. Put away all your annoying things. The girl on the throne was furious. This is Black Banyan's dream realm, and it will not tolerate the blasphemy of arsonists. Matthew smiled as he slowly put away the items. "You're mistaken. I'm not an evil arsonist. I'm just a lowly necromancer. As you can see, I'm seriously injured. It's mainly mental trauma and shock, and this is mainly due to your mistake. You seem to have transferred an advancement ritual for a 4th-tier profession to me, a 2nd-tier mage. No matter what, this should be considered an accident, right? I believe that a responsible soul like you will definitely not sit idly by." The girl immediately stomped her feet in anger. "Are you blackmailing me? How dare you extort a nature soul? Aren't you afraid that I'll kick you out of here immediately?" Matthew bent his waist even deeper and said in a servile manner. "I'm afraid. Of course, I believe that your might is unquestionable in Black Banyan's dream realm. But what about outside the dream? Perhaps you don't know, but I happen to have the Oak subdomain, and I can access the nature domain through it. You don't want the will of nature to know about this accident caused by your negligence, do you?" The girl's eyes widened as she stared at Matthew as if she wanted to swallow him alive. All 10 toes on her fair little feet were clenched tightly. Clearly, she was extremely furious. However, when she heard the last sentence, her face suddenly turned pale. After a moment of silence, she asked coldly, "What exactly do you want?" "Annoying Oakman." Matthew said humbly, "Just a little compensation." The girl said impatiently, "If you have something to say, say it." Matthew looked at her with interest. "First, I want to know your honorific name." The soul of the rainforest originally had no name, but Matthew realized that the girl in front of him was a little special, so he wanted to know more about her. Matthew's question seemed to have stepped on the girl's little tail. She jumped up from the throne and asked fiercely, "Why are you asking this?" Matthew smiled calmly. "If it's not convenient, you don't have to say it." The girl pursed her lips and said reluctantly, "Suya." It was a name that sounded a little different from the common language of Ainder. Matthew's heart skipped a beat. "Suya. Not Sophia or something like that?" Suya snorted, expressing her affirmation. "Who gave you your name?" Matthew knew that the naming of nature's soul was very particular. Ella's name was given to her by the goddess of moon, and those who were qualified to name the rainforest soul were not ordinary people. Moreover, the structure of her name was similar to that of the Sioux people further south. He was naturally very interested. "I'm not telling you." Suya said indignantly, "Why do you care, stinky oak man?" "All right then." Matthew didn't dwell on it. "Then let's discuss the compensation." Suya crossed her arms in front of her chest, her gaze sharp as a knife. "Say what you want, but you better know when to stop." Matthew said naturally, "I want all 3 abilities from the rainforest domain." Suya's expression, which had just regained its calm, instantly twisted. "You're shameless. How can you be so greedy? You wanted all 3 domain abilities. As expected of a disgusting oak man. You didn't even know the most basic sense of shame." Matthew was indifferent. "You can scold me even more harshly, but it doesn't hurt me. I'm just asking for a little compensation." "Impossible." Suya decisively refused, "This goes against the rules set by the will of nature." Matthew said with a playful expression, but you have already violated the rules set by the will of nature. Suya's face turned pale as she tried her best to defend herself. That was not intentional. Matthew shrugged. I'm afraid the will of nature will not think so. Suya slumped weakly on the black banyan throne. Her gaze was a little dull. After a while, she weakly supported herself with the throne and straightened her body. At most 2. Deal. Matthew readily agreed. Suya looked at Matthew in shock. You. Matthew, who had succeeded, tried his best to make his smile look warm and amiable. Hint, you have acquired the domain abilities Vigorous and Arrow Frog Poison. You have obtained Poison Canister, Arrow Frog's Poison XL. A small wooden jar appeared in Matthew's hand. It looked like a small medicine bottle, but it was made of hollowed wood and a stopper. There was nothing in the jar, but 7 days later, Matthew would be able to obtain a portion of the toxin extract of the rainforest arrow frog. This was a true poison. Except for the native species of the rainforest or people with high poison resistance, the arrow frog's poison could easily kill ordinary people or monsters. Unfortunately, he had to slowly wait for the bottle to fill. But no matter what, it was a huge boost to Matthew's crossbow. Other than the 2 domain abilities, Matthew also obtained a permanent status called Predator and a temporary status through the Rainforest domain. Predator, when you attack in your shapeshifting form and successfully kill and devour a creature of medium size or above, you can digest it within 60 seconds and obtain additional stamina, mana, and health points. Cooldown, 6 hours. Irascible Soul, when you are in a state of anger, anger will also return your strength, all attributes +1 in anger. You can also transfer this power to your summoned creature. Duration, 120 days. Predator was a very useful recovery method, although it was limited. However, it was precisely the shapeshifting form that recovered the slowest after being injured. The winged dragon wind god or moon bear would be a little more invincible in a prolonged battle with the predator buff. The more troublesome thing is that it needs to be swallowed raw. Moreover, it requires medium-sized creatures, meaning at least cows and sheep. Matthew thought about the scene of him swallowing an animal whole, and a chill ran down his spine. However, he knew that this only required a process of adaptation. The wilderness was different from humans, and he had to overcome this. As for the irascible soul, it was relatively ordinary. As a temporary state, not to mention the oak tree's double harvest, even the hand of paleness given by the undying domain was much stronger than it. All attributes +1 was indeed a very powerful increase. In a sense, it could also be used to save on attribute improvement scrolls. But the problem was, Matthew's temper was too good. He rarely got angry. Even if this ability lasts for 360 days, I probably won't be able to use it. Matthew shook his head in his heart. At this point, Matthew had already dabbled in the domains of oak, undying, temperance, dragon slaying, and rainforest. It was reflected in the Tai Chi symbol, which was the addition of 2 small commas in the green commas on the left. It symbolized nature and its 2 subdomains, oak and rainforest. There was also a small comma on the right side of death, undying. Dragon slaying and temperance were in the form of small commas on the outside, surrounding the Tai Chi symbol in a symmetrical manner. It looked like many stars surrounded the moon. According to the current trend, Matthew would become a domain integration master sooner or later. However, he was not pleased. Ronan had said that the domain was only a tool and that one should not delve too deep into it. These words were reflected greatly in the gods. They had elevated their domains into divinity and possessed incredible power, but this also meant that they were limited by their designated domain. Even without the arrival of the Calamity Mage, the gods might not be able to proceed down the defined path smoothly. Thank you for your gift. After packing up, Matthew politely prepared to leave. But before I leave, I have a small request. Suya, who was seated on the throne, had long lost her initial vigor. She replied weakly, "Speak." Next, I'm going to pass through the rainforest. Although I've just entered the domain, it's not safe, so I hope to obtain a little blessing. Matthew's attitude was quite frank. Suya stared at him in disbelief. What do you think I am to you? Do you think you can take anything you want? Matthew sighed. You're making me too sad by saying that. I happen to have the oak domain. Pa. A white light flew out from Suya's body and quickly entered Matthew's body. Hint, you have received the blessing of the soul of the rainforest, Suya, Suya's joy. Suya's joy, when you walk in the rainforest, most plants and creatures will show you a friendly attitude. Duration, 18 days. Now, get lost. The girl gritted her teeth and shouted. Matthew had no reason to refuse. As you wish. A strong light flashed. Matthew's body turned into bubbles and disappeared without a trace. On the throne, the girl's body suddenly curled up slightly, and her slender neck involuntarily leaned back. Her face was deeply flushed, and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her hands hung weakly. After a long time, a satisfied moan sounded. The humiliation and helplessness on Suya's face had long since faded away, replaced by a deep joy. At this moment, a little flying squirrel descended from the black banyan tree above the throne. The little flying squirrel looked up at Suya and asked in confusion, "Lord Suya, you clearly deliberately imposed that trial on him. Why did you act threatened by him?" Suya glanced at the little flying squirrel, and her face was flushed with disdain as she said, "What do you know? He smelled like oak. And I hate oak the most." I could sense that the soul of the oak beside him had yet to take form. "This is my chance, I'll take him away from the oak." The little flying squirrel said thoughtfully, "So you still haven't gotten over the shadow of that incident?" Suya glanced at him. Suddenly, a kick flew up. She kicked the flying squirrel far away. After a while, the second flying squirrel jumped down from the banyan tree and looked at the throne curiously. "Lord Suya, if you want to snatch that man away, why don't you be more straightforward?" Suya held her chin with one hand and said in a tone full of disdain, "What do you amo? A truly brilliant hunter usually appeared in the form of his prey. Besides, I'm the soul of the rainforest. If I want to snatch a man, I'll either conquer him or be conquered by him. There's no third possibility." Little flying squirrel number 2 nodded affirmatively. "Then you've probably been conquered." Bang! Suya skillfully launched a powerful volley and kicked flying squirrel number 2 to the horizon. After a while, the third flying squirrel landed. This little flying squirrel looked rather honest and was only reporting diligently. "Lord Suya, the people of the Black Banyan tribe have held 2 sacrificial ceremonies. They are begging you to hold an advancement ceremony for the blow archer named Lumiere." Suya's big eyes rolled up. "Let him wait. I am not free." Little flying squirrel number 3 said awkwardly, "But that Lumiere is determined. In the past few hours, he has killed and sacrificed 8 wyverns or monsters of the same level. It's not good for you to neglect your duties like this. Besides, what's so good about that man? Why don't you take a look at me? Is there something that man has that I don't?" Little flying squirrel number 3 suddenly puffed out its chest and looked at Suya with a burning gaze. Suya sized up little flying squirrel no. 3 and immediately sneered, "You're too small." As she spoke, she stood up with an unfriendly look in her eyes. Don't kick. I can fly away by myself." Before flying squirrel no. 3 could finish its sentence, it heard a whoosh. It was kicked into a black shadow and flew far away. It was even kicked out of Black Banyan's dream realm. Suya stood on the throne, her gaze gradually becoming sharp. "No one or anything can stop me from snatching a man. Do you hear that?" Accompanied by her energetic declaration, more and more flying squirrels jumped down from the banyan tree, forming a waterfall of flying squirrels. "We heard it. We'll go and get some information for you now." For a moment, all the little flying squirrels in the Black Banyan dream realm swarmed out of their nests and into the rainforest. Deep in the rainforest, by the river, Matthew met up with Lorraine through Ella. The moment the latter saw Matthew, he gave him a big hug. This made Matthew feel a little touched. "It's great that you're alive. I'm really worried that if you die like this, I won't be able to get an answer to my second question." Lorraine joked. Matthew simply asked, "So what is your second question?" Lorraine shrugged. "You're a necromancer. I have confirmed that. But I notice that you can use several shapeshifting forms. This can't be explained by coincidence, right? Of course, I'm just curious. If this involves your secret, you can refuse to answer." Matthew smiled. "This is indeed my secret. However, I would have told you this secret later, so there's no harm in telling you now. I yearn for life, but I also chase death. I know the undead, and I stand with the oak forest. This might seem like a deviant act to others, but to me, it's my way of equilibrium. This is my path of legend." Lorraine looked at Matthew in surprise. However, before he could speak, a trembling voice came from the forest beside him. "Wait. Are there still practitioners of the art of equilibrium in this world?" Matthew turned around. Old Lucky was wearing a forest disguise and was looking at him with a complicated expression. "You know the art of equilibrium?" Matthew looked at Old Lucky in surprise. Old Lucky patted the branches on his body and walked out from the bushes. "I've met an envoy of equilibrium several times. He saved my life twice. A very great man. Matthew hurriedly asked, "Where's the envoy of equilibrium now? Is it convenient for you to reveal more?" Old Lucky said regretfully, "I don't know where he went either. In fact, I only know a little about the art of equilibrium. I only know that it's a path created by the Sioux in the south. About 100 years ago, when the Sioux and Django were still friendly, the Django shamans and the Sioux elders had a very deep exchange of knowledge. At that time, the two sides had built many houses on the Gold Coast, and they were very close. It was said that the Sioux was also encouraging the Djangos to build a ship that could cross the sea with them. They claimed that as long as the ship was built, they could bring back the wealth hidden in the depths of the sea and share it with the Djangos. Many of the Djangos were tempted. They yearned for the Su's superb technology. The two sides were working together more closely, and the art of equilibrium was probably a product of that time. But when the feathered serpent god got angry, the Djangos had to cut off all contact with the Sioux. Later on, there were no more practitioners of the art of equilibrium in the rainforest. I heard that the Sioux themselves lost the complete inheritance of the art of equilibrium. The one I met when I was young was probably the last envoy of equilibrium of the Sioux. His final destination seems to be the sea. I'm not sure. Matthew was slightly disappointed. So, you're here for the art of equilibrium. Old Lucky unconsciously rubbed his tobacco leaves. Matthew nodded. Then I advise you to lower your expectations. Old Lucky sighed and said, "The number of the Sioux has been greatly reduced. A considerable number of the Sioux are only willing to believe that the other side of the sea is their home. They are unwilling to integrate into the life of this continent. These people's final destination is the sea. A small number of Sioux who were willing to integrate here lost their ancestral skills and became island natives, not much stronger than the Djangos." Matthew quickly adjusted his state of mind. "Thank you for your reminder, but since I'm already here, I should continue to try." Old Lucky didn't say anything else. Lorraine, who was beside him, asked curiously, "What do you mean by their final destination is the sea? Did they turn into Nagas?" Old Lucky coughed twice. He didn't want to answer, but when he saw Matthew's curious expression, he said, "It's a secret ritual of the Sioux. They firmly believe that the souls of their ancestors on the other side of the sea will guide them on their way back. Therefore, before they die, or when they feel a strong calling, they will step into the sea empty-handed." Lorraine was shocked. "Is that not suicide?" Old Lucky frowned. "In our opinion, this is no different from sending themselves to their deaths. However, it has an extraordinary meaning to them. They consider themselves to be wanderers who were abandoned by their homeland. In order to return to their homeland, they are willing to do anything. In this regard, the Sioux have a particularly strong obsession." "Is there such an obsession?" Lorraine asked in surprise. "It's really puzzling." Old Lucky immediately warned, "In any case, when you're in alien territory, respecting their customs is the most basic cortes and survival rule. The Djangos are like this, and so are the Sioux. It's fine for us to discuss a few things behind their backs now, but we can't say these things in front of them." Lorraine pursed his lips, but he soon became happy again, as if he had new material. "Let's go." Matthew reminded them, "This rainforest shouldn't cause us trouble anymore." As he spoke, as if to confirm this point, he walked towards the two piranha flowers that had been fighting. "Be careful." Old Lucky shouted. "It's all right." Matthew replied casually. Then, Old Lucky and Lorraine were surprised to see Matthew walk to the piranha flower unscathed. The moment he got close, the two piranha flowers actually stopped fighting. Moreover, they did not attack Matthew. Instead, they kept swaying their bodies as if they were yearning for something. "Didn't you say that this rainforest hates you?" Lorraine looked as if he had seen a ghost. "I think she doesn't hate me that much now." Matthew smiled and stretched out his hand. The two piranha flowers frantically rubbed the back of Matthew's hand with their flower buds as if they had been domesticated for many years. This scene was too horrifying and bizarre. Old Lucky almost lost his grip on the pipe in his hand. "Magic, you must have used magic," Lorraine shouted. "Why don't you move aside and let me try?" Matthew took half a step back. Before Lorraine could step forward, the two piranha flowers snapped with fury, and they started to pinch each other crazily. One of the flowers spun around in a big circle after the scuffle was too intense. It suddenly brushed past Lorraine's trousers. The serrated edge of the flower bud suddenly extended and scraped off a few pieces of cloth on his body. "Matthew, the duration of your spell is too short," Lorraine shouted. But at this moment, Matthew turned around and walked into another bush. He could feel that he had entered a strange state. Before he could even do anything, the bushes automatically parted to the sides. A viper groveled at him, and 2 burrowing owls greeted him. For some reason, a little flying squirrel with a bruised nose and swollen face raised a few berries to him. He could clearly feel the direction he was heading in. The path would be smooth and unobstructed. From then on, even without Old Lucky as a guide, Matthew could successfully cross the rainforest. Suya's joy is indeed delightful, Matthew thought. Recalling the encounter in Black Banyan Dream, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl into a smile. Mistake. Who would believe that? The process of transferring the advancement ritual that originally belonged to a Tier 4 adventurer to a Tier 2 mage was like forcefully stuffing a utility pole into a Coke bottle. This process was extremely rough. It couldn't be a mistake. Suya definitely did it on purpose. The rainforest soul's temperament was unpredictable, but Matthew guessed that it was most likely related to his high affinity with nature. In the Black Banyan Dream realm, although Suya's attitude towards him was very bad, scolding and fierce, her gaze never left Matthew, not even for a moment. Matthew understood that look too well. In short, boys had to protect themselves when they were alone outside. He knew that once his high affinity with nature established a connection with nature's souls and spiritual creatures, they would involuntarily want to get close to him. It was fine for people like Lulu and Ella. However, the soul of the rainforest, Suya, was no pushover. Her possessiveness was even more obvious. Conquering the soul of the rainforest was not an easy task. Matthew did not have that level of self-conceit, so he would rather believe that Suya was acting. It's sometimes quite troublesome to have a high affinity with nature. However, on second thought, it was better to be high than low, right? It would take a lot of effort for people with low affinity to communicate with the soul of the rainforest. Thinking of this, Matthew turned around and urged, "Let's go." The 2 of them, who were stunned by the unbelievable scene in front of them, finally came back to their senses. Practitioners of the art of equilibrium are indeed born unusual. Old Lucky sighed and then silently followed Matthew's footsteps. Lorraine spread his hands. "So, should I change the title of my work? Matthew the Equilibrium Master. What do you think?" 2.5 days later, the group passed through layers of rainforest and arrived at a large lake that stretched as far as the eye could see. This is Dalong Lake. Plesiosaurs often appear by the lake. Someone once saw a prehistoric thunder dragon in the center of the lake, but that was a legend from a long time ago. The further they went to the center of the lake, the lower the temperature became. Old Lucky leisurely introduced, "However, we won't stay at the Dalong Lake for too long. Next, we'll walk along the rainforest on the eastern shore of the lake. It'll take us at most 2.5 days to leave the rainforest and arrive at our destination, the Gold Coast." He had been very relaxed as a guide for the past 2 days. Even a fool could see the love the rainforest soul had for Matthew. Wherever he was, no rainforest creature would dare to offend him. Old Lucky only needed to lead the way in peace. The only one who was dissatisfied was Lorraine. It was less fun, but when Old Lucky suggested that he take him on another path away from Matthew, he immediately kept quiet. After a while, he said that he would fight side by side with Matthew and would never give up on his companions. A group of people was resting by the Dalong Lake, enjoying the beautiful scenery while drinking fresh water. It was evening. The surface of the open lake glistened. Matthew noticed that many animals were drinking water by the lake. Wolves, honey badgers, bears, foxes, monkeys, rabbits. These animals seemed to completely ignore each other when drinking water, and the scene was very peaceful. But very quickly, this peaceful scene was broken. A plesiosaur suddenly jumped up from the bottom of the lake, causing countless splashes. Many animals were scared away. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly charged out from behind a rock on the shore. His speed was as fast as a cheetah. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the shore. Then, with a leap, he directly rode on the neck of the plesiosaur. Hiss! The plesiosaur let out an angry roar. But soon, the roar turned into a wail. Matthew saw it clearly. The half-naked Django native with a few blowdarts hanging from his waist suddenly grabbed the neck of the plesiosaur. As the latter struggled, he suddenly slapped the neck of the plesiosaur with his right palm. Paw! 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 The speed of the native's palm strikes was extremely fast. In about 3 breaths, he had slapped the dinosaur over 100 times. Immediately after, the 3 of them saw the plesiosaur's neck seemingly lose its support as it fell weakly to the shore. All the beasts on the shore fled in fear, and the sand and dust flew everywhere. When the 3 of them passed through the sand and approached the shore, they found that the overly strong native was dragging the plesiosaur's neck into the rainforest. The plesiosaur was already dead. Not to mention Matthew and Lorraine, even Old Lucky had never seen such a strange and effective dragon hunting technique. He's a blowdrit user, but he doesn't use blowdrits. His strength is astonishing. Old Lucky speculated. It's also possible that a monster of this level isn't worth him using his weapon. Killing a level 13 plesiosaur with his bare hands, this person was too strong. The three of them looked at the native warily. On the contrary, the latter greeted them generously. Hey, outsiders. You'd better not stay too long by the lake. There's a nest of plesiosaurs here. They're very vengeful, but they often can't recognize humans, so they'll attack you indiscriminately. Hurry up and leave this place. Old Lucky took a few steps forward. Hello, child of the rainforest. May I ask which tribe you are from? The man smiled and said, Hello, my name is Lumiere. I'm from the Black Banyan tribe. But don't worry, I'm different from them. I'm not as xenophobic as the old guys in the tribe. I'm a man who wants to become the king of the rainforest. I know how to improve. If there's a chance, I'd like to see the outside world. Seeing that his attitude was not bad, Lorraine also went over and asked curiously, What are you doing? I'm trying to please the soul of the rainforest, Lumiere explained patiently. I'm asking her to help me organize an advancement ritual. Advancement ritual? Lorraine was intrigued. Can we watch? I haven't seen the advancement process of the rainforest warrior. Lumiere smiled embarrassedly. That won't do. It's not that I'm xenophobic, but this is our tribe's tradition. It's not convenient for outsiders to visit. Moreover, for your safety, you'd better leave quickly. Although most adventurers who could enter the depths of the rainforest had some skills, the Dalong Lake is different. There is a completely different ecology here from the rainforest. Even the soul of the rainforest could not control this place, so we had to be careful. Old Lucky nodded, indicating that he would leave as soon as possible. Seeing the other party's sincere attitude, Lorraine felt embarrassed to continue pestering him. Only Matthew had a complicated look in his eyes. At this moment, he had already guessed that this native in front of him was the unlucky fellow who had prayed to Suya for the advancement ritual. Although this matter had nothing to do with Matthew, and he was even a victim himself, he still wanted to get Lumiere's help as much as possible. How many high-level monsters have you killed? He asked. Lumiere thought for a moment. 21 wyverns, 13 pattern crocodiles, 2 jungle leopards, and some other miscellaneous prey. I've almost cleared the rainforest in the north of Dalong Lake. I was forced to come to Dalong Lake to hunt. Matthew thought to himself, I knew it. Suya was not in the mood to hold an advancement ceremony for others. Matthew felt a chill run down his spine when he thought about how the soul of the rainforest had been staring at him for the past few days. He wanted to help Lumiere even more. Matthew said, How can you be sure that you can move the soul of the rainforest in this way? You've killed so many wild beasts, but she's still indifferent. Don't you think there's something wrong? Lumiere was stunned for a moment, and for the first time, an unhappy expression appeared on his face. Do you know more about the soul of the rainforest than I do? Outsider, I grew up here. I know her better than you do. I am certain that killing is the only way to please the soul of the rainforest. Maybe you're right, Matthew said with a smile. But why don't you change your mind? In the past, it was always one person holding a sacrificial ritual, right? You're still hunting a plesiosaur, which means that the soul of the rainforest has not responded to you. Why don't you let the three of us outsiders accompany you this time? Perhaps we can bring you good luck. Lorraine also tried to persuade him. What he said is not without reason. Perhaps you're just lacking a little bit of luck. Coincidentally, I'm known as the Bard of Good Luck by the Cloud Levels in Cloud Edge City. With me watching, your rainforest soul might even respond to you. Old Lucky frowned. He wanted to stop the two of them from acting rashly, but when he thought of Matthew's peculiarity, he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Lumiere hesitated. Matthew struck while the iron was hot. Tradition is meant to be broken. If you agree to let us watch, then one day, if you leave the rainforest and can't integrate into human civilization, you can come to Rolling Stone Town to find me. I'll give you some help. Lorraine waved his hand and said, Hell. You can go to any city. As long as you say Lorraine's name, you'll have a lot of friends. Well, it might bring you a little trouble. There will be a lot of women looking for you. You just have to tell them that Lorraine has been buried in the sea. Lumiere looked hesitantly at the two in front of him. After a while, he finally agreed. All right, I do need a change of luck, but you can't make any noise during the ritual. You can't offend the soul of the rainforest. She is my goddess. The two nodded in agreement. Lumiere was swift and decisive. He soon brought them to the place where he was holding the sacrificial ceremony. It was a damp crypt. Beside the crypt, there were piles of wyverns and other creatures' corpses. Some of the corpses had already rotted and stank. The sacrificial ritual was quite simple. Lumiere was soon ready. He stabbed 3 wooden stakes into the plesiosaur's head from 3 different angles. Then he lay on the body of the plesiosaur and took a big bite. Then he chanted a long chant in Django language that no one else could understand. A few minutes later, Lumiere spat out the scales from his mouth. His eyes were filled with disappointment. As expected, it still doesn't work. Matthew walked over and gently stroked the plesiosaur's corpse. Suddenly, a dark red light emerged from the corpse. Matthew immediately ran away. Lumiere, on the other hand, pounced on it happily. Whoosh! The red light entered Lumiere's chest. The rainforest in the distance began to tremble violently. I feel it, I feel it. The soul of the rainforest has given me a response. He knelt on the ground with tears in his eyes. I knew my devotion would move my goddess. I'm going to hunt that dinosaur now. After killing it, I'll become the true king of the rainforest. In addition to joy, from the corner of his eye, Lumiere saw Matthew fleeing. He couldn't help but shout, "Hey, foreigner, I still don't know your name." "Matthew, my name is Matthew. Remember, Matthew of Rolling Stone Town." His voice came through the thick leaves of the rainforest. Lumiere repeated the name in his mind. Then, he stood up with a determined look in his eyes. He roared and ran in the direction of the earthquake. I'll go take a look at the outside world after I conquer the rainforest. Tremble, Dinosauruses, the king of the rainforest is here. Even if he ran far away in one breath. Matthew and the other 2 also heard Lumiere's long howl. The king of the rainforest, huh? Lorraine didn't seem to like this title. There's still a hint of barbarism in it. Matthew revealed an appreciative smile. I quite like him. After all, who doesn't like a confident man? 2 days later, the group finally left the rainforest. The lush scenery along the way was left behind by them. The sea breeze with a salty smell greeted them. On the boundless sea, small islands were faintly discernible. The waves crashed against the golden beach. Shells, coconuts, fish and shrimp could be seen everywhere. Matthew bathed in the sea breeze along the coast, and a strange resonance surged in his heart. Prompt, you have discovered the RNAC Gold Coast. You have sensed the domain, equilibrium. The domain was a fixed, continuous, and covered form of presence. It was similar to a magic array. Once it was set up, it only needed regular maintenance to be effective for a long time. Matthew stood by the sea, quietly feeling the faintly discernible power of equilibrium. Someone set up a domain field here, but it hasn't been maintained for a long time. This was what his perception told him. At the same time, more information surged into his mind. The equilibrium domain field was designed to correct the natural deviation and harmonize the balance of the elements. Those who lived here for a long time would have their bodies and minds balanced and would be healthier and happier than living elsewhere. Other than that, what other uses did the domain have? Matthew could not sense it. The domain was temporarily unable to resonate with Matthew. Being able to grasp this fleeting opportunity was already a manifestation of his agile reaction. Hint, you have communicated with the domain field equilibrium left behind by the envoy of equilibrium. You have obtained the elements of the domain of equilibrium, coordinated. Accumulate more elements, and you will obtain the opportunity to enter the equilibrium domain. This wasn't Matthew's first time obtaining an element, but what was different from before was that the coordinated element directly triggered a change in the Tai Chi symbol. Matthew saw that the 2 large commas nature and undying had sunk a certain distance. A trace outlined by a dotted line appeared in the empty space above. It was a large comma that was exactly the same size and shape as nature and undying. Equilibrium. Matthew knew what it meant even without the words. At that moment, he could feel that there was a force that filled the last piece of the puzzle for him. As expected, it's not easy to master undying and nature at the same time. Only by introducing a third party's equilibrium can the path of legend be complete. Matthew's heart was filled with an uncontrollable sense of satisfaction, as if a missing piece of his heart had suddenly been filled. That feeling was indescribable. However, he did not stay in that feeling for too long. Because in reality, it was time for the trio to bid farewell as they traversed the rainforest. In front of you is the Evening Wind Pier. You can recruit boatmen there to head to any island in the RNAC. I will stay in the nearby forest for 15 days. If I don't see you within 15 days, I will return to the rainforest. After saying these 2 sentences, Old Lucky contentedly filled his pipe with tobacco leaves and stopped to watch the 2 leave. Thank you. You are the most reliable guide I have ever met. Matthew thanked him politely. Old Lucky laughed. Have you met many guides? Matthew said honestly, you are the first. Old Lucky nodded. Then what you said is not bad. As they spoke, the 2 of them looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, Lorraine walked over while stretching. Dear Matthew, I'm afraid I won't be able to travel with you anymore. Old Lucky looked at him curiously. From your attitude on the way here, I thought you would keep pestering him until you succeeded. Lorraine widened her eyes and said unhappily. Hey, Old Lucky, what nonsense are you talking about? Matthew is my brother. I'm not the kind of guy who would take advantage of his brother. Old Lucky raised his hands in surrender. Then what is your real purpose in crossing the rainforest? Matthew asked. Lorraine said with a beaming face. You didn't expect this, did you? I had actually successfully deceived Old Lucky. The Django women were never my intention. The women in the jungle had a wild beauty, but I was a little obsessed with cleanliness and could not accept their dirty bodies. The reason why I was willing to go through all the hardships to come here was because a friend asked me to go to SDG Island to play. He said that there were moderate Nagas, sea elf women, and stone elemental beauties who were willing to have sex with humans. One had to know that it was too dangerous to take a boat to SDG Island from the sea. It would pass through the territory of the radical Naga. Therefore, I specially thought of a genius plan. I would reach the RNAC through the less dangerous rainforest. After that, I would head all the way east and meet up with my friends at the agreed location. After that, it would be a good day for me to go out to sea. Matthew's expression turned strange. That friend of yours, have you met him in real life? Lorraine shook his head decisively. No, we mainly communicate through messengers and confide in each other. He has a good personality and is an upright person. Matthew couldn't help but ask, so, you believed everything he said unconditionally? Lorraine smiled and gave Matthew a big hug. Don't worry about me, Matthew. You have to know that I've also trusted you unconditionally these days. Matthew wanted to say something, but he stopped. He only wished Lorraine a smooth journey and hoped that she could sleep with a few more foreign women. He recalled Lorraine's actions along the way. Matthew knew that he was not the playboy he looked like. Lorraine's true strength might be much higher than his own, and this did not include the magical tools in his hands. It was indeed unnecessary to worry about this guy. Take care, Matthew, just wait to hear the story of my return from the sea. Finally, Matthew waved Lorraine off. Then, he walked alone towards the evening wind pier in the west of the Gold Coast. At this moment, suddenly, there was a flash of light behind Matthew. The image of the sword dancer slowly appeared. What's wrong? Recently, he had been acting solo so much more than before. Matthew turned to look at Soldier. The latter didn't say anything. He just took out a long string from his cloak. Matthew focused his eyes and saw that there was a skewer of struggling flying squirrels. They were trapped together by soldier-like dumplings. When they saw Matthew, the little flying squirrels looked at him with tears in their eyes, as if they were begging him to let them go. You mean, they have been watching me? Through the spiritual fluctuations of the summoning contract, Matthew could barely understand what Soldier meant. Soldier nodded. The little flying squirrels immediately panicked. They could not help but wag their tails and beg for mercy. Their large eyes were filled with tears, and it was easy to soften people's hearts just by looking at them. Matthew rolled his eyes and immediately guessed that these little flying squirrels were Suya's spies. However, he had already left the rainforest. It was extremely difficult for Suya to keep an eye on him, so he did not have to be calculative with these small animals. So he said to Soldier, "Put them back in the rainforest." Soldier nodded blankly. The next second, he shook his wrist, and the knots on the rope fell off. The little flying squirrels fell to the ground like eggs. After landing, most of them fled in panic and disappeared into the rainforest in a short while. At this moment, Matthew suddenly realized that there was a little flying squirrel standing in front of him, trembling with fear. It only used its hind legs to support itself, its front claws retracted in front of its chest, and its eyes were filled with fear. "Hey! It's you." Matthew recognized it. Wasn't this the little flying squirrel that seemed to have been beaten a few days ago? It had even offered Matthew berries in the bushes. Most of the injuries on the flying squirrel's face had already healed, but its eyes were still slightly swollen, making them seem even bigger. "Why didn't you go with your companions?" Matthew bent down and asked patiently. The little flying squirrel spoke in human language. Lord Suya doesn't even treat us, little flying squirrels, as humans. No matter how good our work is, she always punches and kicks us. I can't live another day like that. I don't want to stay in the Black Banyan dream realm anymore. I want to follow you, Lord Matthew. Please give me a chance. Matthew looked at it playfully. Why me? The little flying squirrel boldly said. Because only you have the hope of conquering Lady Suya. I hope that one day, when you really do that, you can let me, as your servant, have a share of the profits. Matthew was surprised by the flying squirrel's ambition. What do you want to do to Suya? The little flying squirrel immediately laughed evilly. I want to kick her hard. Matthew looked at it with interest. He realized that this little flying squirrel was different, so he asked again, what's your name? The little flying squirrel said, I don't have a name, and so do my 3,000 compatriots. Usually, Lady Suya can't even tell who is who. She only knows how to say hey 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 very rudely. I've had enough of that woman. I want to defect. Please accept me. Matthew wanted to agree, but considering Suya's cunning, he had another layer of consideration. If you want to follow me, it's not impossible. I need you to prove your loyalty to me. How do I know that you will not betray me like you did Suya? Matthew asked. That's easy. Aren't you a mage? You can cast a curse on me. If I betray you, I will be crushed to pieces immediately. Little flying squirrel said somewhat sorrowfully, actually, I also suggested that Lady Suya cast such a spell on us, but she didn't even have the interest to cast a spell on us. Damn it. How much does she look down on our little flying squirrel? I have to take revenge on that woman. Matthew rested his chin on his hands and thought for a moment. There's no need to cast a curse, but you still need to go through a small test. I hope that you can return to Suya's side now and pretend that nothing has happened. Didn't she want you to monitor my every move? I hope you can monitor her every move for me. I will pass by the rainforest in a while. If your performance can satisfy me, I will consider taking you away with me. The little flying squirrel thought for a moment. Sure, but how should I pass the information to you? There's no rush. Remember it first. On the day I return to the rainforest, find an opportunity to pretend to have been captured and report the information you've gathered over the past few days to me. Matthew encouraged, if you really do a good job, then I won't be stingy to fulfill my promise. The little flying squirrel immediately became excited, but soon after, he had a troubled expression on his face. What's wrong? Matthew noticed this. I now have a chance to escape from the sea of misery, the little flying squirrel said. But I still have many brothers. If I escape alone, and they are still sinking under the violent rule of that bad woman, I will be very sad. Matthew was helpless. He could steal one squirrel from the soul of the rainforest but not a whole bunch. Otherwise, if he really angered Suya, he would never be able to enter this rainforest again. I'm sorry for making things difficult for you. The little flying squirrel was depressed for a while before it regained its spirit. I will return to Lady Suya's side and monitor her every move. However, before I leave, I have one last request. Can you give me a name? I don't want to live namelessly like the other little flying squirrels. Matthew quickly said, that's easy. Since you're a flying squirrel, I'll call you Hoodlum. Good. Although I felt that this name was ordinary, it was probably because my standards were too low, and I couldn't appreciate it. After all, I was just a little flying squirrel that hadn't seen much of the world. From now on, Hoodlum is me and I am Hoodlum. No one can mix me up with the other flying squirrels. Hoodlum cheered for a while, then solemnly extended his front paw at Matthew. Pinky swear, I learned it from you humans, Hoodlum said seriously. Matthew smiled and hooked it with his pinky. Hoodlum bowed respectfully and ran into the rainforest. This little flying squirrel is quite interesting. Matthew looked at Soldier. So, where did you get this rope? Soldier looked confused and started to twist subconsciously. Matthew had to check the data panel as he walked. Finally, he flipped to a message from a few days ago. Hint, your summoned creature Soldier has used the Bondage Master's ability. He peeled the tree bark and emitted it to make a strong rope. Your summoned creature Soldier is extremely satisfied. Bondage Master. That was a real ability. Matthew was slightly surprised. Recalling the scene of the flying squirrels being strung up, he suddenly realized that he should prepare a magic rope for Soldier. This ability might not be as indecent as it seems on the surface. As he pondered, the gray lighthouse with mottled walls in front of the coastline was already close at hand. There was a small dock on the east side of the lighthouse. At this moment, only two figures could be seen on the dock, one old and one young. Matthew walked over quickly. Evening Wind Pier. Under a row of lush palm trees. An old man was resting with his 8 or 9-year-old child. Both of them had black hair, black eyes, and dark skin, but it was obvious that they had been tanned by the abundant sunlight on the Gold Coast. Their skin color was still yellow. These were the typical characteristics of the Sioux. "Hello." Matthew greeted from afar. "Is it convenient to take a boat? I want to go Stream Island." The child looked at Matthew curiously. The old man slowly stood up from under the tree. As he put on his straw hat, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Matthew. "Stream Island doesn't welcome outsiders." Matthew explained, "I have a friend who is a distinguished guest of the island. I have a letter of introduction from him. He is a warrior monk and should be famous in this area." Without waiting for the old man to speak, the child spoke first. "The monk you mentioned, is he the one who likes to talk nonsense and always likes to go into the sea to catch turtles to eat?" The monk did have a full mouth of nonsense, but would he go around catching turtles to eat? Matthew could only probe, "Is his name Liwiki?" "Yes. It's him," the child said unhappily. "I heard that he ate all the turtles on the island by himself. Do you know how ridiculous he was back then? He's just a martial monk." The old man walked over and interrupted him. He said to Matthew, "Liwiki is indeed a distinguished guest of the island, but I'm afraid that the island is very different from when he was there. If you insist on going, we can take you there." Matthew nodded. "The fee is 1 gold coin," the old man said. Matthew asked as he took out the money, "Do you accept the 100 cities Alliance's gold coins?" The old man nodded. "Yes." He took the money and took out a very short flute from his waist. He put it to his lips and played it silently for a while before putting it away. "Wait a moment." Perhaps to relieve his boredom, the old man continued the topic. "There are many small city-states on the shores of the Arana Sea. Most of the civilizations of these city-states came from the north. Some of the city-states here are very rich, while others are relatively poor. However, they are all within the influence of the 100 Cities Alliance. Actually, if you walk around the Gold Coast, you will find that other than the unique customs of the locals, other places are no different from the 100 cities. Matthew asked curiously, "How many city-states are there on the Gold Coast?" The old man pondered and said, "I don't know. There are fewer cities on the North Bank, but the South Bank is very prosperous. There are at least a dozen famous city-states. Among them, Torch City, where the Golden Sacred Lord was located, was the most famous. The other small city-states also had their own characteristics and cultures. However, the South Bank doesn't seem to be peaceful recently. If you're thinking of traveling, it's safer to stay on the North Bank. However, you should never enter the rainforest and do not provoke the Django people and their feathered serpent god. They are a bunch of lunatics." Matthew noticed that the old man's tone was full of resentment toward the Djangos. He wanted to ask more questions. At this moment, the child stood at the edge of the dock and waved at them. "The boat is here. The boat is here." Matthew looked up and saw a white line coming from the sea and sky. When he got close, he saw that the turtle hidden in the white wave was the size of a basketball court in his previous life. "Let's go, young man." The old man gestured for Matthew to follow. "Shwenkunzi will take us to the island." Under the old man's guidance, Matthew tried to get on the turtle's back from the dock, but when he passed the edge of the turtle shell, Matthew slipped. Fortunately, Soldier was behind him. Matthew stepped on Soldier's face and climbed up smoothly. "Be careful." At this moment, a gentle voice sounded in his ear. "Recently, I've had a lot of strange creatures growing on my body. Although Old Ollie and Little Stone helped me get rid of them, there's always some slippery mucus left behind." It had a nice voice, but the only drawback was that it spoke very slowly. Matthew knew that it was the turtle under his feet talking, so he replied curiously, "Are you Shwenkunzi?" "Yes, this is the name my master gave me." "Oh, he said that this is a Taoist name." "Unfortunately, my comprehension is not high, and I have not achieved much, so he did not bring me along when he left." The turtle said gently, "However, I'm not interested in the balance of heaven and earth that he talked about. Being able to sleep in the warm seawater every day is the happiest thing in my life." Matthew asked, "Is your master an envoy of equilibrium?" Shwenkunzi replied, "Yes, but I haven't seen him for 30 years. Perhaps he has returned to the east, the land he has always been longing for. Perhaps he had died in the depths of the sea, just like the other Sioux. Sometimes, I feel that the Sioux's obsession with their homeland is actually a curse. What do you think, Old Ollie?" Old Ollie was silent. After a while, he said, when I'm older, I'll walk towards the sea, just like my compatriots. I don't care if it's a curse or not. I only know that this is not my home, never. As they spoke, the turtle slowly left the dock and swam toward the depths of the Arena Sea. It was noon, the sun was shining brightly, and the sky was blue. A few small islands could be vaguely seen scattered on the surface of the sea in front of them. The milky white beach reflected the bright sunlight. A tall coconut tree grew in the middle of Xuan Kunzi's turtle shell. A group of people was currently sitting under the coconut tree, enjoying the shade. Matthew, Xuan Kunzi, and old Ollie were chatting casually while the child named Little Stone was curiously walking around Soldier. Soldier, who had always been dull, was very patient at this moment. He played with Little Rock for a while and suddenly disappeared from the spot. Wow! Little Rock cried out in surprise, attracting everyone's attention. In the next second, Soldier reappeared with a big coconut in his hand. Are there coconuts on my back? Xuan Kunzi exclaimed. Speaking of which, my master is really unreliable. Back then, in order to make it convenient for him to ride me, he actually planted a coconut tree on my back. Can you believe it? Everyone laughed. Soldier cut the coconut with a short knife in front of Little Stone. Then, he handed it to him. No, I can't take it. Little Rock seemed a little reserved. My grandfather said that we can't take things from guests. Soldier was dumbfounded. He only knew how to offer the open coconut. Matthew was about to help him out. However, at this moment, Xuan Kunzi's voice sounded with a hint of unease. I think we might not be able to go to the island today. Old Ollie asked, are you getting lazy again, Xuan Kunzi? You haven't reached the standard for exercise this month. Xuan Kunzi said slowly. No, it is not me. It's the Naga. Matthew immediately stood up. On the surface of the sea in front of him, there were layers of white waves. On each layer of white waves, there was a Naga holding a sword. Recently, the Nagas have been very restless and have been patrolling the sea. I'll try to speed up and shake them off. Xuan Kunzi said with great effort. However, 5 minutes later, the turtle was surrounded by a group of Naga warriors. Sigh, if I hadn't been lazy when I was in class with my master and learned a few more tricks, I wouldn't have been caught up by the Naga. Xuan Kunzi let out a long sigh. Now that things have come to this, we can only surrender. I hope they can arrange a more comfortable sea prison for me. As they spoke, a small leader who was taller than ordinary Nagas approached. Where are you guys from? Where are you going? Answer quickly. Nagas were a strange and evil humanoid creature that lived in the deep sea for a long time. They had the ability to walk on the waves and had a strong concept of territory. They would often mercilessly expel or destroy human ships that passed by. Matthew had heard about this race when he was chatting with Master Ronan. It was said that the appearance of the Naga race was related to a twilight creature who was sealed by the gods in the early days of the Age of Enlightenment. The twilight creature hated the gods, so he wanted to steal humanity from the gods. He lured some humans into the sea and taught them evil cannibalism rituals. During the cannibalistic ritual, humans who believed in the twilight creature mixed themselves with a large number of snakes. The power of the ritual made the flesh of humans and snakes indistinguishable. In the pain, excitement, and unclear ravings, the first Nagas were born. They were known as the original Nagas. The original Nagas were highly praised by the twilight creature and inherited the most evil power from the latter. Every original Naga had the power of a lord. Then, under the orders of the twilight creature, they went to different seas and established huge Naga tribes at the bottom of the sea. However, the Nagas that were born later did not have the chance to receive the blessings of the twilight creature. Although they also had strength and qualities far beyond humans, they were far inferior to the original Nagas. The Naga that was born later was called the derivative Naga. The Nagas that were now dominating the many seas of Anger were mostly derivative Naga. As the original intention of the twilight creature was to transform more humans into Nagas, the Nagas often left the underwater tribes to plunder the population. Because the Nagas were matriarchal, over time, there was a saying that the Nagas liked to snatch men. Of course, this was not a rumor. Due to the influence of the twilight creature, the proportion of females in the Naga race was extremely high. After losing the inheritance of the cannibalistic ritual, the Naga tribe had to ensure that a fixed number of foreign males integrated into it every year, or the tribe would be at risk of extinction. Other than that, Nagas were generally strong and good at using weapons. They also had several natural spellcasting abilities. On the sea, if one encountered a group of Nagas, fleeing was the best choice. At this moment, in front of Matthew, the number of Nagas surrounding Shwenkunzi had already exceeded 30. They had seaweed-like green hair that reached their waists. Regardless of gender, the upper body of the Nagas was always naked, except for the waist, where the human part joined with the snake tail had a large string of colorful shells. Below the shell was the snake-like lower body of the Naga, but at this moment, it was blocked by the white waves below, making it difficult to see clearly. I'm a traveler from the Gold Coast, and I want to visit Equal Stream Island. Matthew said kindly, they're just sending me there. The Naga leader narrowed his slender eyes and said, this is the territory of the Naga kingdom. Outsider, your appearance here means that you have offended the Naga queen. I'm afraid that the Endless Sea prison is your only destination. At this moment, a female Naga behind him reminded him, the Endless Sea prison is full. There are only a few empty seats next to Big Mouth August. Isn't that even more interesting? Bring them to see August. The male Naga revealed a cruel smile. Matthew noticed that Little Stone's face turned pale when he heard the name August. He asked a few questions in a low voice and found out that August was a sea beast that had once caused trouble in the Arana Sea. He was known for his greed and gluttony. It was once the nightmare of the nearby people, but it had been subdued by the Nagas. Throw your weapons over. The Naga leader ordered. There's no need for that. We can talk. Matthew's face was full of smiles. I'm a traveler from afar. I've collected many unique small items along the way. Don't you want to hear about the interesting stories of my journey? I'm willing to share it with you. The Naga leader sneered and wanted to say something. Suddenly, he turned his eyes and said to Matthew, then come here. Let's go over there and talk. I hope your story will be interesting. The two of them came to Shwenkunzi's tail, and the other Nagas tactfully dispersed. Matthew fumbled around in his luggage and immediately handed over a medium-sized bag with a smile. There were a few mirrors and some berries in his pocket. Apart from that, there were also gold coins. You're very tactful, young mage. The Naga leader snatched the bag from Matthew's hand and said with satisfaction, I can let you leave, but you must remember that the great Naga queen is about to unify the Arana Sea. Our Naga kingdom is taking shape, and this is unstoppable. If you want to travel on the sea, a few interesting stories might not be enough. You had to go to see the queen, bow to her, and beg her for special permission. Only then could you travel on the sea without any problem. Matthew pretended to be grateful. Thank you very much. If I have the chance, I will definitely visit the queen personally. The leader was even more satisfied. He could not help but say a few more words, a traveler like you must control your curiosity and not wander around. It was inevitable that there would be bloodshed in the process of unifying the Naga kingdom, but it did not mean that you'd be safe once you leave the sea. Like and subscribe.